How's it going, everybody? ZBilbs back here with another video, and today I'm going to be going through the entire Sabaton catalog, their 10 albums, and ranking them from my least favorite to my favorite. I decided after the release of their latest album, The War to End All Wars, this would be the perfect time to go through their 10 albums and rank all of them from worst to best. Just before I get into this, this is just my opinion, so this isn't necessarily the right opinion or anything. I do think that all, except for one, of their albums are genuinely range from good to fantastic, especially like even pretty much once you get from like 6 or 7 on up, every album is really, really good. So don't take everything with a grain of salt, but I love Sabaton and I love a lot of what they have. But without further ado, let's get going with my last placed pick. And by a wide margin, at 10th place, I have Metallizer. Now, this is their third released studio album, but it was actually their first album recorded. They just couldn't release it for some sort of reason until a little while after. And I don't really know why they released it at this point, because it didn't have anything to do with their sort of military history that they had with Primo Victoria and Dominatrix. It's all about, metal stuff, which is interesting because I do have a few metal songs and some of their military songs, military albums as well. But you can definitely tell that just this album is the most bare bones when it comes to production quality. Joachim, I think that's how you pronounce his name. His vocals, for the most part, are just really dirty and gritty. Sometimes better, but for the most part, I just not a big fan of really anything from this album. I'd say the only highlights that I have is Shadows. I think that is a genuinely great song. I love Lord of the Rings, and I think it was just a really cool take. I'd love to see a modern remake of that one. And then also 7734, which in this album, it's okay. In their remake of it in Heroes album, it is one of my favorite Sabaton songs. But I do enjoy it nonetheless. Here, but overall it's a very just dull, forgettable album. Just everything else that they've done is a lot better. But that is Metallizer. Moving on from here up, I think everything is a significantly better. Every album I think is good from here on out. And then starting with this next one at number 9, I have Dominatrix. Now these next two I swap back and forth. They are super close, but Dominatrix as of right now is right here. This is one of their earlier albums, so they're still sort of getting in their stride with, their style, what they're good at, and they've got a lot of really solid tracks. The title track, Dominatrix, is really solid, really good Sabaton anthem. Other really good ones, In the Name of God is probably another one that I and a lot of people like. There's some other good ones like Light in the Black. One that I see most people don't like a lot, but I really like. This used to be, on no joke, in my top 20 Sabaton songs. It's slowly fallen as I've started to fall out of love with it a little bit, but Nuclear Attack, I think, is very much underrated. It's really cheesy and really repetitive, but I think it's just super fun. Overall, there's a decent amount of solid songs, but nothing quite reaches the highs that other albums reach. I would say Dominatrix and Nuclear Attack are probably my top 2, and even those two I wouldn't consider them great songs. They're just solid songs. So that is why Dominatrix comes in at number 9. But closely ahead of it, we have their debut album, Primo Victoria. I've seen this is really high for a lot of people because this is kind of quintessential classic Sabaton. And I can totally see that because it's got pretty much their most classic replayed track in the title track, Primo Victoria, which is absolutely an excellent track just across the board. I would say in terms of quality, Primo Victoria has more just recognizable fun songs than Dominatrix. But why it's so close between the two is that I think Atero Dominatus has more consistency in terms of its songs, whereas there are across the board some good ones in Primo Victoria, but there's very few that really have stuck with me that I will come back to and listen to. Kind of the big three that I come back to and listen to from Primo Victoria. It's obviously Primo Victoria, that's a huge one. Wolfpack is really solid, and Panzer Battalion is another really good one. There's a couple other good ones here and there, but that's kind of the big three for me. And because it's only three really solid ones, and pretty much every other album has a more significant amount, that's why I can only put it as high as number 8, but I can definitely understand people who like that more classic, less produced style of Sabaton, why this might be one of their favorite albums. But nonetheless, it is very good, and that is Primo Victoria at number 8. But coming up next at number 7, from here on out, I think there's definitely a gap when it comes to those first three. Well, Metallizer is down here, and then you've got Atero and Primo Victoria up here. Everything else goes from here and just off the charts. I think everything else is a great album. It's really hard to place a lot of these. But at number 7, I have Coat of Arms, their 5th released studio album. This album is just great across the board. Almost every song, I think, ranges from good to great in some sort of manner. I mean, you've got title track Coat of Arms, you've got Uprising, you've got Screaming Eagles, you've got Midway, you've got The Final Solution, and then you've got my favorite from this album, Wehrmacht. That's, I think, a really great under-celebrated song from Sabaton. Now, once again, why this one isn't any higher is totally a personal preference, and that is, as I've said, I think it's very consistent, just really great across the board. But even like the ones that I like in this one, they just don't quite reach the highs as other stuff, like Coat of Arms, Screaming Eagles, Midway, all good songs, but they're just not quite on that next level of Sabaton stuff. Wehrmacht is really the only one that is kind of a higher level of Sabaton song. Also White Death, that's a really good one too. But overall, just a really good album, but it just doesn't quite reach those really high highs that other Sabaton albums get, and that's why I've got Coat of Arms coming in at number 7. But next up, at number 6, ahead of Coat of Arms just by a bit, I have their 4th released studio album, The Art of War. This is another fan favorite of Sabaton's, and I can definitely see why, because I think this one is similar to Coat of Arms. It feels really similar in style and substance that they're doing. I feel like they were in a similar phase of just studio production. It's kind of Coat of Arms and Art of War kind of go hand in hand, just like Primo Victoria and Atero Dominatus. And I think this one it's very similar in consistency. It's very consistent throughout, but I think it reaches just a little bit higher of highs when it comes to its best work. Some notable songs from this one: The Art of War is solid, 40 to 1 is solid. Then it's got some absolute classic Sabaton quintessential songs. I can't talk today, I'm sorry. Ghost Division. That is almost everybody's top 10 Sabaton songs. It's not quite on mine. I still love it, but it's not quite on a highest tier. For me, my favorite from this album, by actually a wide margin, is one that I kind of wrote off at first. I wasn't a huge fan, and I don't even know if this counts as an album or if it's a bonus track for the album, but y'all know Swedish Pagans is so good. That is my favorite of this album by a wide margin. I just think it's fantastic. You also got Talvisota, you've got Panzerkampf, so just a lot of really great Cliffs of Gallipoli. I can't forget that one either. Just across the board, just really, really good songs. It's so hard because these are all just such good albums, but it ends up being just which albums have higher of highs. And while I would say Swedish Pagans, Talvisota, and Ghost Division are the top 3 from this album, other albums have higher highs just by a bit. So that's that, but Art of War, that is coming in at my 6th spot. But next up, at my 5th spot, we have the most recently released album, The War to End All Wars. Now, this one, it was kind of hard to place at first because it's kind of hard to place just a new album because you don't know if you have that, that recency bias going into it. But I've listened to it a number of times. I've let it soak for a few days, and I think I've landed here at the 5th spot. Now, if you've seen my review of this album, you'll know that I think this is an absolutely great album. I think it's just good across the board, but I think, as I mentioned in the album review, it was hard not to be a little bit disappointed because obviously this is indeed at roughly halfway through my Sabaton albums ranked. There's still 4 albums that I like better than it, so it's not a top tier Sabaton album for me. That being said, it's still in really, really good company here. Art of War and Coat of Arms and even Primo Victoria are not at all albums to sneeze at. So just the fact that it's in company with those albums, I think, says a lot. But I think I've seen kind of mixed reviews of this overall. I think Metal Trenches had this as his favorite Sabaton album, so I can see someone doing that. I think I've seen other people put it kind of mid or lower. I can see that too. I think overall, this is just a really, really good Sabaton album. It has all of their great modern flares. I tend to be more of a fan of the modern era Sabaton than the older stuff, just personal preference. But for me, this one just didn't quite go the extra mile. It was fairly consistent. Besides the first and last song, I think everything in the middle was worth listening to. It just didn't quite reach those really high of highs that other albums reached. It had the consistency that the other ones had, but once we're in the top 5 here, you can't just have consistency. You got to have consistently quality, high quality songs because all of these high albums are so good. And this one just did not have that consistency of very high quality songs. For me, the best of the best when it came to this album, Stormtroopers was the only absolutely practically flawless song in there. And you had Dreadnought, Soldier of Heaven, Lady of the Dark. There were some other like solid songs in there, Christmas Truce, Hellfighters, but nothing else was just quite on like that really high tier. So that held this one back a little bit from being any higher, but still a really good album overall. But moving on to my top 4, this is where it got so hard. At least 4, 3, and 2, on my album score system, they were all 3 of these next were tied for score. I could, any day I could swap these next 4 around because they are so freaking close. I ended up doing a tiebreaker by which album had the best song. So the song with the best the album with the best song got second, and then third, and then fourth, and so on. So it was so hard to do that. These are all not just great albums. I think they're fantastic albums. But enough jabbering. 4th place, we've got Careless Rex. This is another fan favorite, for good reason. This album is just really something special. I think this is just absolutely the most unique album that maybe even just metal people have done in general, because who has even heard of the Swedish Empire before it took place in a Sabaton album? Like, what an absolutely genius move. This is one of the best designed albums that I've seen, at least in terms of chronology. It feels like you're learning about the rise and fall of the Swedish Empire song by song. It's going through battles and generations, and you're seeing the rise and fall of the leader, Careless Rex, and it has such a diversity of songs. It's just a freaking work of art. I just love this album so much. It pains me to put this low, but as I've said, just so many great albums or songs in those albums. Some standouts from this album, we've got Line from the North is solid, Gott mit uns is great, Killing Ground, fantastic. We've have got the title track, Careless Rex, that shows up on a lot of people's favorites, absolutely. Poltava is another, I think, under-celebrated classic. Runai Imperi, the very last one, so good. 1648, I believe. Literally like all of them. And then my favorite on this album is one not a lot of people say, and that is Long Live the King. I just think that one is just so just mellow and brooding and just absolutely fantastic. It is in my top 10 of Sabaton songs, but why this is not higher is that these next two albums had songs that are in my top 5 as far as Sabaton songs. This is in my top 10, but not 5 for Long Live the King. So it is what it is, but overall this is just such a great album, and that is at my 4th spot. Moving on to number 3. Once again, a very, very, very hard pick, but I had to go with The Last Stand. Once again, just like all of the other albums I've said, it's consistent. It's got consistently great songs. Once again, it just came down to which song was my favorite, and the favorite song wasn't as high as the next album's favorite song. Favorites from this one: The Last Stand title track, so good. The Last Battle, underappreciated, super good. Wing to SARS, a lot of people really like that one. Me, a little less so. I enjoy it, but I don't love it. Hill 3234 or something. I might be wrong about that. The Lost Battalion, great. You've got Shirayama. That is my favorite from this album. That is so freaking good. Sparta, another great one. My second favorite from this album is definitely Rourke's Drift. That is another great one. Just across the board, this album's so great, so great. I could go on. I'm not going to waste too much time, but that is my number 3 spot, The Last Stand. Next, coming in at my 2nd spot, edging out The Last Stand just by a hair, we have Heroes. This one and The Last Stand, I think people write off a little bit. I really don't know why, because both of those albums have some absolutely fantastic songs. And when it comes down to it, same as these other albums, Heroes, it's consistent, it's consistently quality, it's just fantastic across the board. The tiebreaker for this one, that is my favorite from the album, and my second favorite Sabaton song overall is Night Witches. That is just the most powerful, heavy-hitting, just freaking awesome Sabaton song, and one of the best songs that I've ever heard, honestly. Love that song to death. So good. Other standouts here, you've got Resist and Bite, No Bullets Fly, Soldier of Three Armies, Ballad of Bull, Far From Fame. Even though I don't really count it into the calculation, I really like the bonus songs, Man of War and Double 734. Just such a good album. I know I've missed a couple other great ones on there, but once again, just short and simple. Heroes is fantastic, love it. But at my last spot and my number 1 spot, this is actually a relatively wide margin, and that is The Great War. As of right now, I honestly think this is my favorite album of all time, and it's really not even close. Honestly, no other album has been so consistent and so consistently fantastic. This album, I believe there are 10 tracks in it, and I really, really like 9 out of those 10 tracks. The only one I am not a huge fan of is Devil Dogs. I don't care much for that one, but everything else is so good. Great War, Future of Warfare, 82nd All the Way, Attack of the Dead Men, freaking The End of the War to End All Wars, Red Baron, and my absolute favorite, oh yeah, Ghost in the Trenches, oh, so good. Literally, I think out of my top 20, I think like 7 are from this album alone. That is how freaking good the songs in this album are. My favorite Sabaton song of all time is in this album. That is Fields of Verdun. That song is so heavy, it's so intense, it's so powerful. I love it to death. But that's pretty much the gist of it. The Great War is just amazing subject material, just heavy, fun, unique songs that just make up my favorite of Sabaton stuff. And I just think, as of right now, I just think it's the best album of all time. And that's about it. So let me know in the comments below, what are your favorite Sabaton albums? What are your favorite songs from those albums? Now, next week, I should have my review of Ghost's new album, Impera, followed by a ranking of their albums. Let me know what other bands you'd like me to cover in the future. I'll try to get some videos out as quickly as I can on a relatively frequent basis. It can be hard sometimes because of college, but I will do my best. Let me know what other videos you want to see. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, share it, do it, all that. But yeah, that's all I got for you. I'll see you later.